Jill here with Sirius Tellus Moon Jupiter, our Mercury day. The moon, thank you, recording, is 23 degrees Virgo. Mercury, 19 degrees Pisces, retrograde. And the ascendant is with Beta Persei and Uranus, 26 degrees Taurus. Ruled by this Venus that's approaching Neptune and then Saturn. What can we say about the effects of the lunar eclipse or Moon Ketu? And I'm going to take it with Moon Ketu, Moon Rahu, because I'm also going to address the eclipses with the moon with Rahu that we had in Pisces. When we talk about mundane events, so the moon usually affects people. And here there is a calling for expansion, leveling up, that comes together with purging or dematerializing what no longer serves. And when I talked about patterns of relations, the one thing left unsaid was relations to a nation, a tribe, and relations between nations and people. With Mars in Pisces, there are both contemplations about the expansion of war, as well as contemplation of the expansion of alliances and the shifting relations, or purging, dematerializing, no longer serving patterns of relating between nations as certain alliances expand. So we can think about the allied NATO nation, but we can also think about the European Union. We can think about the dematerialization of the Arab Peninsula's oil power or monopoly oil power. We can think about the dematerialization of tribal or national patriotism at the expense of, let's say, with that square from Lilith, women rights. One of the things that I saw among BIPOC and Black women is putting the word woman first before other relational interpretations, and even a communication between white and BIPOC women on learning from one another, particularly now when entire sector of women's rights is being put to challenge. And so, unlike previous times where being Palestinian came before being a woman, and whether probably it was not by choice, but it contributed to the enabling of basically the lack of sovereignty that the Palestinian nation or people endured. With this eclipse, I see a shift where being a woman doesn't come after any type of tribal, familial, or national relation, and this is unlike what was before. Women thinking, we saw it also before the eclipse and through the previous lunar eclipse, women emigrating away from United States. Right now in my country, in my European country, the Netherlands, a lot of people retire outside of the Netherlands because they can get partial retirement benefits, I can attest that it simply is because they need a housing, another moon signification. So it's kind of like, well, if I can't live with these health benefits or welfare benefits within the country, then I will try to live outside the country where I can afford to live in a house. Um, where, by the way, in previous years it was done so in Europe, but people would come to Europe because there they could afford um, rent, depending on, with a lot of tax evasion in the 70s. um, but I wasn't from that sector. So there were a lot of unregistered business. It was not to open a business today in Netherlands means a mountain of bureaucracy, and it wasn't always like that, which is how we would get a lot of people that would move to um, European countries. So, but when I think about BIPOC women emigrating outside of the U.S., it happens mainly because of the depletion in women's rights in the United States. So this eclipse with Lilith squaring the nodes, um, unlike the previous eclipse where Lilith was closer to being a point of Talis, or or if people had to emigrate outside of United States, at least it was because they were improving upon their women's rights. It's kind of like, well, they chose to immigrate out rather than were deported. But with this sector, with this square, we see how the woman's sovereignty comes before or comes in friction with the national identity, the tribal relation, or even the familial relation. So this is probably an eclipse where we're going to see women's rights being at point of friction with imperial or entrepreneurial or any other type of union of nations relations expansion, because Mercury here is the compartmentalized nations or the agreements between nations. Jupiter is expansion. Jupiter is also in Pisces is also there is a duality where a call for diverging from is prompting a bigger call for unity. Okay, it's the kind of situation where before we expand, we want to reconsider our terms and conditions. And this is something that we're probably going to see affecting. We saw yesterday when I was covering Macron's response to the United States um, calling to have basically nuclear weapon, and with all the pros and cons, is definitely reconsidering sovereigning up as the allied nations are required to pay up. Whether it is allied nations, European Union, federations, because this is also around the fourth house of United States, and calling, for example, to reassess the structure of United States, given the diversity in how people accept or not accept ice, coal mines, and other things that are calling for a state reconsidering the contracts it has with the federation. So this is purging a lot of the things that no longer serve in the overall leadership of United States, in favor of accentuating on the people or the various states rather than the various conglomerates, not to dissolve United States, but definitely to use withdrawal from or sovereigning up in the face of, let's say, the Congress, in order to rethink United States and allow a place to unify United States, but not as a coal mining working camps, debt, labor camps, imprisonment of homeless, evacuation of people by completely untrained personnel, even when we take about normal acts of deportation into account. And of course, ventures like Iran, like Venezuela, that can easily develop to another Iraq, like Greenland, that further depletes the people by all that it means. Okay, I'm not saying it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, it's a good decision, it's a bad decision. These are the sum of the results of those decisions, however good or bad they were. Um, more type of change in contractual relations that we may see here is the notion of digital ID. Okay, Mercury is contracts. National contracts can be residence, can be questioning dual residences. For example, one of the videos that were running was how the United States can denounce the residence of people where in the past people were fighting to basically divorce their United States. There are people that were fighting for a green card, and there were people that were fighting to divorce the United States because they were paying so much taxes even outside the country. Okay, if I as Dutch, for example, make money outside of Netherlands, I'm not indebted to pay taxes in the Netherlands. Um, Granted that I bring, let's say, well, if I live outside Netherlands, in Netherlands, I'm in the tax laws of Israel. But let's say I had a business, then I would be basically bringing income to Netherlands. And so if I would sell outside of Netherlands, then the fact that I would funnel this money through my Dutch bank account, if I would not do an offshore business, in many countries, again, perhaps in the Netherlands, this is changing. I know in Israel, in many countries, this is the case. If I would do business in Israel selling to people abroad, then I'm not I need to report that, of course, but I don't. I'm not supposed to pay taxes for that. Of course, when there are pedo rings and trafficking rings vanishing people's documents, then the due diligence would be from those who, which is another facet of Saturn Neptune. Um, uh, yes, unless people want to risk doing even more illegal stuff that would already be identity theft and stuff like that, and would put them to white collar, big issues. Um, More things, particularly when the people, yeah, particularly when the people actually contacted the relevant offices and announced the issue. Um, and with Neptune, as usual, the missing is the evidence. So if somebody erased certain things or erased, or if somebody prevented somebody to have documents, it's basically interfering in, okay, juristic procedure. um, More things to do with those residencies and so on and so forth. Um, it's basically about purging what no longer serves. So, in the cases where, let's say, American residents were fighting to let go of their residents, they run into cases where the US would want to denounce the residents, while other countries like the Netherlands are reintegrating dual citizenship, and particularly considering the people that lost their citizenship or lost their dual citizenships in years where it wasn't allowed or wasn't supported. So each country with its own documents registration, but then there is also Mercury as a digital form of contract relating to nations, and that's usually the topic of digital ID. And here as well, certain we might see abandoning of certain ideas. We might see gradual progress towards some sort of a digital ID, or digital. I don't say this credit score so much as digital ID, um, whether it's facial recognition or anything of that sort. It's kind of like we're probably going to level up technology wise, but we're going to have to remove the things that were no longer serving anyway, even in the previous technologies. What are those things? Again, that really depends on the country, the nation, the people, and the relevant complications regarding that. For example, during COVID, where people needed to have an address to apply to the municipality, what we call a BSN in Netherlands, then they were given address by the municipality, and there was a change during, I think, Rutte's government, um, where the municipalities were forced to give an address so that people will have that BSN to proceed to basically get out of homelessness and be registered. So those type of changes we might also see coming with a more digitalized form of identification, for example. Um, More mundane stuff. There is a discussion about the possibility of no longer having interception missiles, particularly when we're talking about attacks on Israel. Um, that can absolutely um, change or shift something in the war. With Saturn Neptune, this can happen. Um, for example, there was a time where Iran ran out of missiles for a while, and then it sent drones. So those type of changes regarding the technology of the weapon. Okay, again, large orb, a co-presence of Mars, Rahu in this eclipse. Mars ruling over Saturn, Neptune having to surrender, having weapon. I said what I said, okay? Um, and that was another issue that came about. By the way, there was a bombing where the door of a shelter was boomed. Um, and Mercury rules doors. So this was the dematerialization of a door of a shelter. Oh, the Histadrut, which is labor union building, was bombed, and also a supermarket. And I just think about Mercury, particularly as the ruler of Gemini, ruling labor union structures or buildings, and that was quite interesting. So dematerialization of the building of a labor union. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people, civilians, that were hurt. But then again, so were in schools in Iran, and elementary school can very much be a Mercury Jupiter Moon type of configuration. Okay, Moon is foundational. Mercury is small or small children, and Jupiter is teaching, um, and it can also be around a technical school. There maybe are things that I'm receiving that I didn't know are happening. Um, or connecting to previous things. Um, any sort of technological warfare. Again, we might be purging things that are no longer serving or no longer working. Um, but it is in order to expand. It's very fit transit or configuration for the disarmament because but it's disarmament by battle because it's kind of like to expand the fight. They shoot missiles and then they shoot missiles even more. So we basically are going to see um, the possibility of depletion of arms. Right around the eclipse, we saw the depletion of the maritime forces of Iran. And but unfortunately, that can pertain to civilians and civilians being harmed at war. This configuration with the co-presence of Mars, Jupiter ruling Mars in the sign of the moon, moon with Ketu. Unfortunately, we saw civilians being harmed in armed conflict. And in that case, I can't say it's purging the civilians that no longer serve because because sometimes Ketu just means death, not purging what no longer serves. You see, solar astrology or evolutionary astrology always tries to see the benevolent, the evolution, and so on and so forth. And then sometimes it's just grim. Sometimes it's just Moon Ketu mean civilians hurt in armed conflict, civilians dying, genocide and democide. Um, we can take a look at the local news. Or not. Okay, 10th wave of attacks in Tehran. This is the IDF. Yes, there was a scandal with, how do I even say that? Yeah, there was a scandal with employees that were murdered um, by neglect at their workplace to do with um, basically energy. Uh, yeah, and this is something that goes on the line of the coal mines in the U.S. Basically, the malfunction of a safe working environment for the energy and minerals related employees, which can lead to a strike of the miners as Uranus ingresses to Gemini, which is my prediction for Uranus Gemini, particularly with setup, particularly trying Pluto and sextile Saturn Neptune. Dahia in Beirut, people need to evacuate because they say it is using Hezbollah. Again, we can see the connection between loosening up the connection between housing and real estate. Dahia, if I'm not mistaken, is a refugees. I know there is a refugees camp. I don't know if it's just a neighborhood and not a refugees camp. Um, but this is where cities are being evacuated, and that's something that usually is more of a Gemini and or end of Virgo Al-Qaid point, and the moon is slowly approaching to Al-Qaid, but it's not an Al-Qaid transit, and definitely not an Al-Qaid eclipse. But this is something that is, again, civilians being harmed, or dematerializing housing as a result of armed forces. Okay, 300,000 people evacuated from South Lebanon. 300,000 people evacuated from South Lebanon. I mean, ICE could have never. Like, that's, and we're not even at war with them. It's like, well, there's Hezbollah. Um, so, Beirut, again, IDF in Lebanon. Lebanon, if Gaza was Israel's Nam, then Lebanon is definitely Israel's Nam. Um, it's the equivalent to having another battle with Iraq, which between United States and Iraq, which I think might happen. And so that is a very unhappy swamp that takes forever. Um, Sri Lanka ship was drowning. Um, it was an Iranian ship. Again, I don't know. Maritime Iranian ship drowning, and Sri Lanka um, announced that it's next to their shores, and they had to rescue the people. In the United States, they would just bomb the entire thing. In the United States, there would be Hiroshima and Nagasaki falling, but in Tehran, Sri Lanka tries to rescue the people. And so, um, yeah, the difference in relations between states. Um, Threats from Israel. Every leader Iran will elect would be a destination for assassination. Now, what if they elect the Shah? Okay, an American military basement was attacked around the airport in Baghdad. Like, um, should I go back to covering the truth? One is more Article 5 than the other. um, China is concerned from the situation in Iran, wanting to renew the negotiations around the nuclear energy of Iran. Again, of course, China, albeit holding territories in United States, will not be so happy about the fact that United States has evacuated United States from United States to the Arab Peninsula. New Egypt, hashtag New Egypt. Um, again, um, okay. Tokyo trade depletes in 11%. So If it gets to the news, then I guess it's news. And this is the trade in Asia, particularly around oil, SP 500, Nasdaq loosening up in 1%, Dow Jones 0.8% down. But then there are also the Brent rising 1% and the WTI 0.6%. You can see that I'm not an investor in these bubbles. But it's true. So, world news. This is not. I was not recommending anything. I was just addressing the fact that I could barely read what is what was written there, because it's like, well, if it's weapon, if it's oil, if it's nukes, I need to reassess. If it's rare earth minerals, I need to actually study the topic first, and if it is medicine, then the bubble pops. So definitely real estate, laser, and so on and so forth. World news. Don't ask me what to invest in. Invest in zero rape, zero slavery society. That's the thing that would make your investments yield pretty much whatever they are, or at least not bankrupt you to the point where you don't have residence or food or something like that. Yes, people don't like Macron's speech in Israel. Let's see what happened. Macron condemned the Iranian attacks on the Gulf states, but was not supporting the Israeli-American move. And stating that they were executed outside of the international law, which cannot be confirmed. Well, probably, and I saw also Americans addressing that, the bombing of a school with civilians and students and children is not something that any nation is quick to support. And people are looking at what would be considered war crimes in the aftermath of an attack. Again, Iran chose an election that was a very good election to attack Israel. Although Israel and United States talked about a preventative attack towards Iran, Iran had a fantastic election in there too when we look at it sidereally, but also when we look at it tropically. Okay, so definitely doing the big power moves of the West is also a strategy that needs to be reconsidered. And people are looking at what would be considered a war crime in so and so years. And I think it is a correct appraisal. And I totally understand why would a country prevent from being fully supportive of something that included bombing a school, whether, and again, I cannot comment on the result of that action. Okay, I do not know the details. Were people called to evacuate, not called to evacuate? But of course, when the result is a school bombed with civilians dying, then that results leaves people reluctant to to stand fully behind those actions, and that's all across the board possible. Probably if it was France attacking France probably knows that would be the American response, and and so it takes its own its own opinion, its own stand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So according to Macron, the way the attacks continued towards um, Hezbollah, he's criticizing Hezbollah um, and saying Hezbollah made a big mistake of attacking Israel and risking the Lebanonian people. This is again, France is traditionally a part of the P5, a part of the allied nations, a part of those who are expected to send troops boots on ground first. And Macron knows that. So he knows that while he cannot go full-blown hoorah to the attack of a school with a ton of civilians, he also has to prepare the ground to justify whatever France would do in South Lebanon, if and when they are called to establish their own sovereignty in the region. Israel is considering boots on ground, which would be, yes, Israelis, ask any Israelis, nobody likes boots on ground in Lebanon. It's call Israel to respect the territorial wholeness of Lebanon. Again, already stating the borders, making sure that he's not being used to justify any um, outrageous responses. If somebody wants to have a mention in Beirut, then he is not enabling routers um, with his declarations. The debate on PhD system shifts from numbers to impact. PhD system, again, Jupiter studies. Mercury is detail. Co-presence of Mars here gives us the Saturn, dissolution of Saturn. Saturn can also be dissertation and the structure of PhD system. So this is something completely different from the other topic. This is from South Africa. For March 2026. Tarot put targets and systemic strain. This already strains. This phrase has already strained. Okay, so they want to increase doctoral degrees. Oh, well, drop the Peter rings. Footage from across Iran shows scale of strikes. Gaza crossing closed that we saw yesterday. UK physics leaders expressed deep concern over funding cuts in letter to science. Again, depletion of resources with Mars in the sign of Jupiter ruling over Saturn, depletion of resources to research, innovative research, and speculative science. I don't perceive that to hold beyond the 3 years of Saturn in Aries. And by the way, I do predict that there can be a lot of cornerstones in funding of research, but those will be quite scammy. Again, I return to the colonialism clock and the myth of psychiatry as a science in the colonies that got British people to fight for lobotomies. And I don't know what are they fighting for here. Perhaps more Los Alamos, but this is something that can be used to make a bubble of science or a myth of scientific evolution, which, by the way, as a philosopher of science, discussing scientific revolutions, astrology here shows me more prediction than any other prediction that I would use outside of astrology, because this bubble thingy can occur with Neptune in Aquarius, Neptune in Pisces, and Neptune in Aries. Particularly Neptune in Aries is the new science, and the new here can be both real and imagined. And in the case for colonialism clock, Britain used that to reestablish class, um, and reestablish their national identity, taking pride in the so-called myth of psychiatry before it was an established science. This was the case that changed completely my decision to do a dissertation and my um, philosophical paradigm, and yet even Larry Loudon is not accurate enough as actually looking at charts and the outer planets going through Aquarius and Aries. Um, World news in brief. Russian strikes on Ukraine condemned, migrant deaths update, devastating floods in southern Brazil. I need to read what I read. um, Deaths of migrants. Unfortunately, Saturn Neptune is still ruling mass deaths. Mars co-present with Rahu. We see that perhaps as the listing of the dead. Although we see that at the end of February, it is between two eclipses. Silence in November. This was Global South condemns Israel, Iran, U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. Middle East attacks intensifies. Trump says he rejects Iran attempts to talk. Again, Mercury here can also be negotiations, and there can be letting go of negotiation strategies that are no longer serving at this time, but integrating new negotiations and new strategies and new relation between negotiations and actually war. Okay, Trump to Politico. I really don't care if Iran plays in the World Cup. He might if they win. Iran continues to hit back at U.S. Israeli strikes. Um, Thousands of flights canceled. People can completely on the World Cup thingy. Like, hey, don't nudge me to talk about it when that's your field. and and then be upset that I was the one talking about that. And so Iran continues to hit back at U.S. Israeli strikes. Oh, another thing I noticed with intelligence. Intelligence sometimes operates as a personality calls me, being extremely tender, me giving more credit than the national debt of the United States. um, Sometimes, and it works as various consciousnesses are juxtaposed with one another. That same old trick of getting people hyped up, portraying themselves as kind of like correcting their reputation in the eyes of someone, and then trying to abandon or present or blame or pretend that somebody is deserving of a certain fate that they don't. That thing is one of those things that we are purging. Okay, again, Mercury in the sign of nonverbal communication. Mars ruling over Saturn, Neptune in Aries, um, denoting that intelligence, strategies, Sol Rahu embodying the heart, and Moon Ketu letting go of trauma bond based relational patterns. So that was something that definitely came about before and around the eclipse. And this is further calling to re-embody the heart, or to embody, or to further embody the heart in a way that um, does not go through the mythical building up and collapsing of relation, reputation, personality, opinion, okay? All those things that outside of the context of intelligence are called smear campaigns, or even patterns in um, narcissistic relations. They're simply a part of psyops. And so it is, I hope, further embodiment of heart based energy, and understanding that those repeated patterns do not serve intelligence, do not serve the people that are a part of intelligence, because all people want to be perceived, and be thought of well. And it's not just an ego thing, it's a heart thing. And all people, and in places that are survivalistic, then people may have the tendency to have it as an ego thing, rather than a simple, honest, and authentic heart connection. And that can be because of those training systems that are aimed at creating a trauma bond or being in power over the relation. And again, if one can reach a point where they're being seen, but they can't take it to manipulating that or trying to break that. For example, if somebody worked so hard um, to show what is behind, let's say, the word pedo, okay, and when they have accomplished that, that is not the time to preserve the pedopathology. That is not the time to preserve um, the treason that was a part of the pedopathology. And this is where one cannot see the other in an authentic, heart embodied connection and appreciation, and enable the continuation of pedopathologies. So, um, and those people that try to get vengeance at one, and it's what is vengeance? It's like an ego thing, but the repetitive pattern here has to be um, has to be changed for there to be an actual heart embodied authentic connection, and not an ego fluctuation type of thing. But again, we are all learning to embody the heart, and we are all growing and learning. And those sudden downfalls, or sudden enrage and stuff like that, are just a part of the basically pathology of intelligence as a psyop, that the people pay the price for, because they were called the narcissistic without people being informed that this was how they were trained in intelligence. Iran continues to hit back. Latest world videos. I don't know. Blackstone's 4 billion. New World talks over control. Bloomberg News reports. Blackstone. An hour ago. Ja. Cookie statement. Geen cookies. Niet nur alleen één. Talks between Blackstone and the New World Order. It was a hack into my nervous system, but that hack was something that is actually absolutely, but they said something absolutely correct. The Chang family resists giving up control over the Hong Kong property developer. Bloomberg News reported on Wednesday, citing people familiar with the matter. New York-based private equity firm proposed investing about 2.5 billion in special purpose vehicle that would make it New World's largest shareholder, while Chang family would contribute 1 billion to 1.5 billion. Um, Mercury does rule cars, and Jupiter can be planes. So cars with wings can be on the menu. Jupiter is also at the point where he met with Venus. So the Jupiter Venus around Sirius is usually development in aviation, development in technology, and indeed we saw flying cars flying. Um, New World and Blackstone was the most advanced party in the process. Sell an equity stake. So we see Chang family lining up with Blackstone, basically expansion of an equity conglomerate with Saturn, Neptune being big conglomerates and Mars ruling them in the sign of expansion. That is not surprising. This goes around cars or cars with wings, which is the Jupiter Mercury. More things I can think about. World's largest city geyser erupts for the first time since 2020, Yellowstone. Um, okay, 2020 we had COVID. It was the Jupiter. It was the Jupiter Pluto Saturn conjunction. Um, mind gymnastics, mind gymnastics. Saturn is with Neptune, sextile Uranus. Like this is a stretch. And sextile Pluto, but it's basically a boiling fart that has toxins in it. I don't know what's this boiling fart doing. Like, I don't assume that I can delineate it on the go. Maybe my colleagues can delineate that. Could it be Saturn, Neptune with Mars in the sign of water? Because that could be like boiling water, and Saturn is a tower, so it's like a small tower of boiling water. But Pisces is usually oceans, and yet Jupiter is in the sign of seas. And the ruler of Ketu with Rahu is like the water are emitted from the basically land that is kind of like a swamp, so it's a mutable land into the air. so, so this is delineation of where the toxin is coming from. Could be Neptune, acidic. Neptune in Aries can be acids. Um, yeah, that is that's the time to consume some apple cider vinegar and have actually a good use of Neptune in Aries, um, which supports the gut health and supports the brain function as well. I think this is it for the eclipse. Lunar eclipse, full lunar eclipse, last one until 2028's New Year. And we proceed to have the moon becoming closer and closer to Alkaid. Ruler of the moon is retrograde, but for fixed stars, it can be a good election if that is showing up in the area with a good hour. We don't usually consider the hours, but mainly if you're a day chart, I would try to refrain from doing a Saturn hour talisman. And if you are a Mars hour talisman, if you are a night chart, Saturn hour talisman might be more heavy on the vessel than is good for you. Other hours, basically, and we want the house. We want Alkaid either with the ascendant or midheaven. Wolf's tooth, please, only ethically sourced. I don't have wolf's teeth in my possession. And trying to wait out the 22 midheaven only to have a 22 lot of fortune was, um, was the funny part of this episode.